Thank you for joining us. In this episode from Season 6 of Beyond Belief, George sits down with Ken Johnston, one of the 5 original pilots who worked for NASA to test all of the Apollo equipment, including the lunar module. Although skeptics still deny that we ever landed on the moon, Ken's original photographs from the Apollo mission aim to put that debate to rest. We invite you to continue your search for truth and discover a wide range of topics within the 7 seasons of this ongoing series at Gaia.com. We have thousands of exclusive on-demand videos to explore perspectives that you won't find in the mainstream.
Ken, welcome to Beyond Belief. It's great to have you as a guest.
Thank you very much, George.
You know, you've done a great job for us on the Coast to Coast radio show, and I'm really looking forward to this and this vital amount of information that you have brought with you.
Well, it's about time to bring it all forward. I've kept a lot of it secret for almost 50 years now, and I've had a lot of encouragement. Said, got to get it out to the public to where everybody knows, and then I'm a lot safer.
Just so everybody knows, right from the outset, you believe that we went to the moon, correct?
There's no doubt in my mind, and I guess the easiest way to say it is where I've had people that come in that had the question in their mind because they've seen fake movies or fake things about being on the moon until they sit down with us and look at the hundreds of thousands of people that were involved in getting us to the moon and look at the actual evidence and the records and things that I have in my archive. Then they come to realize absolutely we did go to the moon.
Okay, now let's go back to the beginning for Ken Johnston.
All right.
How did you get involved in the space program?
Oh, well, I don't mind if I jump all the way back. My dad was a pilot in World War II, as a bomber pilot, and he lost his life there. The only pictures I had was of him in his flight suit and things, and I wanted to grow up and be like my dad and become a pilot. Well, as time went on, and I wound up going through military school and then off to the Marine Corps and then to officer pilot training in Pensacola, where I learned to fly. And then when I finished up my tour with the Marine Corps, I went to Houston, where my brother, Dr. A.R. Johnston, was one of the engineers that helped design the Lunar Receiving Laboratory for us and the big vacuum chamber. So he said, come to Houston, you'll find a job. Well, I went down to Houston and applied at 5 of the top aerospace companies and received great offers to go to work for them. I went to work for the Grumman Corporation that built the lunar module. That's where we got started.
And you went, and then you started evolving into the program, I guess.
Absolutely. First of all, we had to go through all the same training courses that the regular astronauts did. The 4 of us, we were classified as civilian astronaut consultant pilots. We were not NASA astronauts, but we were the test pilots that tested the lunar module in the vacuum chamber. So when we got the lunar module down there, that was our job to do that and get it all checked out.
Did you know people like Yeager and those folks?
I met Chuck Yeager once. I also met Dr. Werner von Braun in one of the reviews that we have on being sure all the equipment was ready to go for each test.
Now, what about the original astronauts?
All 7 of them.
You knew them all, huh?
In fact, in my lunar spacecraft logbook, where I kept, just like your regular pilot's logbook, I kept the signatures of every one of them that I ran into. And now I'm looking back at that book, and I've got over 72 some odd astronauts that have signed my logbook, in which I have just about all of the original 7 signed it as well.
I've always tested people, younger people, to ask them if they knew who the original 7 astronauts were. Mm-hmm. And they can get maybe 1 or 2 names, and then that's it.
I mix them up sometimes with the second group, but I mean, you've got...
Let's see if we remember them. Ready?
Okay.
Let's go with, and you correct me, Alan Shepard. John Glenn. Wally Schirra. Gus Grissom. Scott Carpenter. That's 5.
Yeah.
Oh.
Deke Slayton. Okay.
And 1 more.
Gordon Cooper. There we go.
That's it. We got them all. All amazing Americans.
Absolutely. The only thing that I struggle with a lot, because I was the youngest kid on the block. I was only 26. And almost all the astronauts were 10, 15, 20 years older than me. And now that I'm getting all this information out, unfortunately, so many of them are no longer here in the flesh with us.
That's right.
I greatly miss them, but I just find it difficult to believe that I really had the opportunity to work with all these great people and to do the things that we did back in those days.
Did you want to become an astronaut, or were you just in training?
Oh, no. The moon wasn't my goal. Mars has always been my dream and goal. The moon, the goal was to help get us to the moon and get us back for what John F. Kennedy, that was the goal for the United States. So I've been as high, over 10 miles high, almost a suborbital, but not quite, in flying in the fastest thing I ever flew in was a F-4 Phantom when I was in the Marine Corps. But the opportunity to actually go into orbit and go into space has not yet been real. But I still have goals. If you don't have a goal, your dreams are going to fall apart. But
so you were part of the program, the Apollo program as well, when the tragedy occurred.
Yes.
Of course, when
Yes.
we lost 3 astronauts
Right.
in that capsule. That put us behind some time, didn't it?
it set us back for about a year. My first cousin, Donald Garrett, was with the Air Force as a captain. He was one of the test pilots for the Air Force with NASA to test the command module in the vacuum chamber, just like my group tested the lunar module in Chamber B, the small one. And Don was at the Cape and had just set all the switches up for the plugs out test. That's where the spacecraft is all powered up by itself. And he actually tapped Grissom, Chaffee, and White on the helmets as they went in. He got his plane flying back, and he got the word there'd been a fire and that we'd lost all 3. And even with tragedies, we do learn.
We do learn.
We do learn.
And we've had, of course, 2 space shuttle tragedies as well.
Yes, we have. And I played a very interesting part, particularly in the second tragedy. Well, because
Columbia.
I actually did the testing of the tile repair kit and using a manned maneuvering unit to be able to fly up close to the shuttle and be able to use this putty, which very same consistency as Skippy peanut butter. But then I have pictures and reels of showing me fully suited up with a chain going up 2 stories high so it could simulate 0 gravity on Earth, doing tile repair. And they actually carried the tile repair kits on the first 3 missions.
Geez.
But the decision was made, well, we could save the MMU and the stuff about 1,500 pounds. It's because we're doing so good. And that's the problem I think that we made, is we were so fortunate and so lucky that we were just thinking, well, we'll try. And
We got a little careless.
They got careless, and
so.
I knew all of them except for personally, except for the woman teacher that was on board. And it's always been very personal because of being involved as I was. I got to work with each and every one of them.
Ken, I want to get into the moon landing with you. I mean, you and I agree that we landed on the moon.
Absolutely.
And we've had people on the moon. But there are a lot of skeptics out there who don't think we were there. So
We hope you are enjoying this YouTube podcast episode of Beyond Belief Season 6. Follow your curiosity into Gaia.com. Search for more answers. Discover more conversations on some of life's biggest mysteries. Gaia.com offers ad-free streaming of thousands of exclusive and original videos. Become a member and watch as we empower the evolution of consciousness.
But there are a lot of skeptics out there who don't think we were there. So I want to look at a piece of video and have you and I comment on what we're looking at.
All right.
A lot of people say pictures were faked and everything else. So let's take a look at that.
Those photographs can be demonstrated not to have been taken on the lunar surface. Now, if they were not taken on the lunar surface, there's only one other place they could have been taken, and that's on Earth.
Documentary evidence from all 6 of the successful Apollo landings shows similar anomalies. In some, areas lit from behind, which should be in deep shadow, are bright and perfectly visible. In other pictures, the shadows are at near right angles, suggesting 2 separate light sources. Perhaps most surprisingly, there are no stars in the Apollo photographs, even though they were taken from space. When the archive film is sped up, the astronauts appear to be running at normal speed in terrestrial gravity. And why does the flag appear to be fluttering in a breeze, even though there's no wind on the moon?
So, Ken, some of those questions seem to be justified, right? So,
On the surface.
how do we answer some of that? The waving of the flag, for example.
All right.
Clearly, it looked like it was in a breeze.
Now, you have to understand that the flag had a bar across the top, and it had weights down at the bottom.
All right.
And also, on the lunar surface, when they're moving, they're kicking up lunar dust. It hits the pole, causes the pole to shake. And that's where you got the wave in there. It wasn't from air. In a studio or something like that. Now, some of the other ones where you had that sea on the rock and stuff like that. Now, we know very well that the government, anytime that they're going to do a dangerous situation that might reflect upon the political machine, they're going to put out a very positive report. Oh, we landed on the moon, we did this, it was great. Or, oh, it was a terrible tragedy. So they have a backup. And I have no problems with the fact that there are some faked movies or videos of what we did. But whenever you go and you look at the moon, you look through Hubble, and you can do that as private citizens now. They can take time and use the Hubble and point it. They can zoom in on each one of the landing sites, and there's the descent stage sitting there. There are the tracks that we made on the lunar surface. There's the rovers parked on the moon. Now, how did they get there if we didn't go? The people talking about that stuff don't do their research. They just jump on something for publicity.
See, I've always said recreation photos may have been mixed in with the originals, giving those people the credence to say we never went. Is that possible?
I wasn't aware of any of them being mixed in with the originals because having the privilege of being there at the Lunar Receiving Laboratory and working directly with the photo lab to issue the pictures of samples in orbit. And that brings up the things about stars. I actually was present in the room and seeing professional strippers, as they called themselves. They would take a photograph, they'd get a positive transparency, blow it up to 8 by 10, and over light tables, they would paint out stars and things, and or things that were of controversy they didn't think that we were old enough, mature enough to look at.
Like anomalies?
Like anomalies. Now, and then one of the quickest, easiest ways, if you're looking at a picture of an astronaut on the moon, and you want to know if it's been doctored, look for the antenna coming up from the portable life support system on his back. It's a very skinny little antenna sticking up from the right-hand side of the plis, and if it's painted out, because you can't paint right up to the edge of a quarter-inch or a half-inch diameter antenna. We use that a lot when we're going through my archive of pictures about, whoop, you can see here they painted out. Sure, and then nowadays with the digital things, you can look at the different pixels of how they painted or airbrushed things out. We didn't have airbrush back then.
So Ken, in 1969, in July, when we land on the moon and Armstrong comes out and Aldrin comes out of the lunar lander, they talk about seeing, this is what we've heard, objects on the other side of a crater. What did they see?
And again, I try to stick with things I have first-hand information on. This comes into second-hand because of an acquaintance I had that was at Mission Control, and later was confirmed by a ham operator that
someone you trust.
I did, yes.
Okay,
very much. He's not with us anymore. He said that, and maybe paraphrasing a little bit, the signal came back. He says, they're here, they're watching us, they're on the rim of the crater. But this was after and I got dinged on saying that he switched to the private medical channel. But in reality, the mission director would tell, okay, everybody switched off. They switch everybody off and just allows him to talk directly with either the medical officer or with the mission control operator. That's how those signals and the communications happened, so that the masses of people in mission control at the time weren't privy to that.
Repeat what you just said about what Armstrong may have said.
Is that they're here, they're watching us, they're on the rim of the crater.
What could that be?
Well, I think Buzz Aldrin summed it up pretty good in his last statement when he talked about the light craft. It got pretty close to them on their way to the moon. And he says, in reality, since nobody knew what it is an unidentified flying object.
I mean, and at that time, we didn't have a lot of paraphernalia up there in space, did we?
No, we did not. No, we did not. In fact, Neil and Buzz, Buzz talked about this a bit, that he and Neil talked about, well, what can we do? We need to find out what this is, but we don't want to tell them that we're being followed by a UFO to the moon, or they'll cancel our mission. So they chose to call Mission Control and say, where's the SRB?
Yeah.
The solid rocket boost, not SRB, but the main rocket that gave them the final push to put them in the translunar.
After it separated.
Right. And there was a long pause, and Mission Control finally said it's about so many thousands of miles away, which means they wouldn't have seen it.
That one.
But it was their way of alerting Mission Control that there was something following them.
Could it have been the Russians?
No. Yes, they did send craft to orbit the moon before we did. Unmanned, and then there is some questions about whether or not they actually tried to get a man on the moon that died in the process. I've read and heard about those.
I've heard stories about that.
Then again, it's second, third hand, so I'm not privy to it for real.
I had been told that because of that space race and the effort to land a human on the moon was so intense that even we were in a position to to land a man on the moon and not bring him back just to say we did it first. Had you heard that?
That was discussed. That was discussed, and I'm sure we had guys that were willing to make that sacrifice to do it. The men and later the women that became the astronauts, they had the determination and the intestinal fortitude to be willing to sacrifice themselves for our country to keep America great. I think we've lost a lot of that.
Yeah, we sure did. So in your opinion, Ken,
Yes, sir.
in your vast experience, what do you think Armstrong was making reference to?
Well, the only, in my impression, and from what I've seen from the anomalies that I've discovered on the lunar surface, it had to have been craft extraterrestrial, and I feel very comfortable in admitting the fact that we have been observed for quite some time.
And they were watching us.
And they were watching us.
Ingo Swann, the late remote viewer, in a book called Penetration, talked about remote viewing the far side of the moon. Our government used him in secret programs,
yes,
along with his staff. He says in that book that he saw structures on the moon on the far side.
Right.
Structures by whom?
Okay, that brings up a very important part. It's in my book, and I've got the publicity out right now.
Ken's Moon, by the way.
There you go.
Go ahead, tell us.
Dr. Thornton Page, who was in charge of the Lunar and Planetary Science Department, where visiting scientists would come and stay and work during each mission, he asked me to check out Apollo 14 16-millimeter sequence
That's
camera.
Edgar Mitchell's flight.
Yep,
right?
Edgar Mitchell's flight, right. And set up a private showing for him and 6 other of the scientists in the building right next to the Mission Control Building. I did that. I've set it up now. I learned how to run those kind of gun sequence camera projectors where you can freeze it, you can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can go frame at a time. So it was important to do that. I'm showing this particular. I checked it out of bonded storage at the photo lab, set up the cameras, and the gentlemen were there, and I started showing the picture. We're coming around on the back side of the moon towards crater Tsiolkovsky. Now, very quickly, of the hundreds or even the thousands of craters on the moon, why is this one crater, Tsiolkovsky, get mentioned so many times if it wasn't important? That's just a side point here. So here we're approaching Tsiolkovsky crater, and the sun angle at the time on the moon was like half moon phase, so half of the crater was in shadow. But as we're going there, there's this, in the shadowed part of Tsiolkovsky are these 5 domes, and the best way to describe it is if you take your hand, turn it palm up, and bring your fingers together, and look at it from on top, you've got 5 little bubbles, or 5 domes. And one of them had a column or a steam sticking up. Dr. Page had me freeze it, zoom in, zoom back, freeze it, go and stop, and finally he turned to the other guy and said, "Well, boys, what do you think of that?" And they all laughed. It was an inside joke. I didn't think about that until years later, that Dr. Page knew exactly what was on that reel because he had me check out that specific 15-minute.
What did it look like to you?
They like glass domes, and these things would I'm looking at now, and I had been unable to prove that to anybody for decades until my graphics illustrator happened to get a hold of a copy of the reel, and later a transcribe of the astronauts talking back and forth, and they're talking about, wow, looking through the section, wow, look, there's Tsiolkovsky. Oh, and look at that. It's dark in the crater, and it's all there. Now that's basically the transcribe of their comment. So what he found is a doctored picture or part of the reel of Tsiolkovsky crater and that shadow, but by shifting the light with the modern technology we have, it brought up the bubbles. You can see it had been painted over, but not enough to get rid of all of it, and you can actually see there are 5 little points of light and this one big glow in the dark shadow. So we now have some proof that what I had shown to them back in 1970, 71, that there was a base there on the moon. Now, since then, we've come up with an even better, absolute irrefutable proof of a base on the moon.
Oh, really?
Before we were capable of it.
And let's talk about this base.
All right.
Who put it there?
Well,
did we put it there in a past civilization?
Were we capable of doing that in 1971? The answer is no.
Were we capable of doing it 1 million years ago? What if this
That's
planet,
a possibility.
What if this planet had incredible technology that somehow got obliterated, and we have just started over again? And so maybe we went to the moon 1 million years ago. Possible?
There are ancient texts, the ancient Sumerian texts, the Indian.
They talked about the flying Brahmanas.
Right, all of those. They talk about our high technology existence in past time. So what you're saying is a possibility that it could have been our stuff or the remnants of our civilization from back then. They're still watching how we've recovered and where we are now. Are we going to blow ourselves up? Are we going to join the intergalactic federation of sentient beings, if you will? So it could be.
How big were these structures?
Okay, here's the photo number if anybody wants to copy it down, and that's AS 15-88-11970. That will show you the Apollo 15 command module with the lunar surface below it. And mind you, I had this picture in my archive for 44 years, and I'd only looked at the command module because I'm a pilot. That's what was important to me. Mm-hmm. My artists and the people out here that are artists will admit the fact that they use a different part of their brain to look at things. And he's saying, "No, but look what's on the lunar surface." Yeah. I said, "What are you talking about?" And he has me look at it, and it's in my book, and it's now in the archives at the Roswell Museum. All of it. You look at it, and there's at least a dozen or more domes. They're in perfect little alignments. They're in grids. They're all set up there, and then there's some larger ones.
Clearly not natural.
Absolutely not natural. I have geologists.
This is amazing.
And the nice thing about it is those domes, if you look at Tchaikovsky's, basically 24 nautical miles across, and you're looking at these domes in there, they have to be at least as big as the Astrodome or and opaque from being illuminated from the inside. So I think we've got the goods.
We have some emails in here for you.
Oh,
Jason
good.
From West Palm Beach, Florida. Was there ever a point where you feared for your own life in the space program?
Just very shortly, and this was after 1995, when there was a group of us at Boeing. Now, mind you, we didn't have emails and things in those days. We had interoffice mail envelopes. Mm-hmm. We called ourselves the Majestic 12. I don't know where we got that name. Yeah. But what we would do is anyone were to pick up any newspaper article or a thing having to do with UFOs and whatever, we'd send everybody in our little group a copy of it. Well, by that, we also would review various books and things. There was a book that came out on monuments on Mars. And the gentleman who wrote that, Mr. Richard C. Hoagland, mm-hmm. was at Seattle. And now I was a 737 flight instructor at the time, and I didn't have a flight training that night. So one of my friends called me. He says, "Hey, Richard's going to be down at the Coliseum. Why don't you go down there and see him and get your book autographed?" And I always like to get the book autographed by the author. Sure. I went down and I thought, well, I better, because he'd been asking, there about to be people out there that have saved data and records and pictures and things. They need to come forward before they're gone. And I took that as an invitation, so I wrote up a little letter. I have this, that, and everything. Went into there and walked up to the desk where the ladies were. And I said, here's a letter from Mr. Hoagland. She's reading the letter. She looks at me and she says, "You're just who we've been looking for." And I'm thinking, I'm in trouble. So in a couple minutes he comes back and he says, he looks at me and he says, "Come and sit on the front row." The next morning they came to my house and started going through my archive. And my archive became the control because mine were originals off the original negatives. And he would get letters and things like that from people are asking questions and saying, "Well, look at this picture I got from NASA. What is it?" And they would compare it to mine and they say, "Well, yeah, there's something there," or "No, it's not."
One more email here for us, and that's from Shelley from Ogden, Utah. She says, "Was there anyone else that knew you had all the data when you decided to go public?"
The only person who knew was my wife and my
she was
two children.
Of all this?
Yes, she's. In fact, at that in the book you'll find while we were looking at other pictures, she says, "By the way, what is this that's reflected in the astronaut's visor?"
Sure.
And that became the key there. If you want to know what NASA didn't want you to see, look in the visor, the one being photographed, because you'll see in the visor, you'll see the astronaut taking the picture mm-hmm. in the back of it, and anything that's an horizon up there, they didn't paint out because it's reflecting in his visor. So yeah, she's been supportive all the way, and we've had moments when we were concerned when they've come after me, attacking me personally, my life, my career, and everything else. And all we do is, I don't do it anymore. I don't even play the game with the attack dogs, the the people that go out after you, because I don't have to. There are enough people that have seen all the evidence, and they go out after them, and I'll let them do the work.
If we're being visited, where do you think they're coming from?
You touched on it a little bit. It could be ourselves coming back. And again, this is just pure theory. I have studied a lot of Dr. Zachary Sitchin's works, and I have a doctorate degree in theology, and I've studied almost all the major religions in the world. And I can see where if you take the different religions and you look at how they claim we were formed, and you look at the ancient Sumerian text as well as the Indians, we are the aliens. We are. Our
the
DNA
aliens.
has been manipulated, and I've come to believe that very strongly. That we were part of what was evolving, if you want to use evolving, here on this planet until it became necessary to tweak our DNA, and I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable with coming forward and saying that.
So the theories are that it could have been us.
Yeah.
It could be extraterrestrials from other planetary systems. They could be coming from other universes.
True.
It could be all of the above.
And probably is a combination of all the above.
Where do people get the book, Ken's Moon?
Oh, it just came out 2 days ago. You can go to kenjohnstonmedia.com.
Spell that name for us, Ken.
Ken, KenJohnston,
Yeah.
media, immediate, there. What's the big one where you order books all the time?
Amazon.
Amazon. It's on Amazon.
course.
The fact that it came out just 2 days ago and they've already sold 10 of them, so I guess the word's getting out.
Good. Ken, in your opinion, is there a secret space program?
The short answer is yes, and I think the evidence is in the film and the pictures coming back from Mars, where you can see that they've gone in and brushed out. And there are a few that they have missed. And as I said, my graphics illustrator Brett Shepard has those, and he's coming out now with a publication of his own soon, which will show that. So, yeah.
Don't you think it's foolish on their part to hide these things?
It is now, because like on the moon, you've got Hubble looking at it there, and we've got people all over the Earth watching everything transmitted back from Mars. The biggest problem we have right now with ISS is that the government tries to cancel or turn off the switch so we don't get the direct feed every time something comes close to the space station up there. There is so much happening that it's almost impossible to keep the cat in the bag.
In your opinion, why did the Soviets, the Russians, stop their program after being so aggressive in the beginning?
Because, I think it's because once you've lost the race, you've got the whole economy that they had to try to do and keep up with our kind of economy. It was just totally destructive to their whole structure.
Ken, thanks for being on the program.
Real
and
pleasure.
more importantly, thanks for coming forward with this information.
Thank you. I might say, the other people out there, get it forward. The time is now. It's time for the soft disclosure. People are ready for it. Let's make it happen.
We call the program Beyond Belief because of people like Ken Johnston, who come forward with information that truly is out of this world. Thanks for watching.